Super Mario is one of the biggest games of all time, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in this world who hasn't heard of the Plumber and his younger brother Luigi. But how much do you know about the classic game? In this video, we're going to take a look at 25 things you never knew about the Super Mario game, including its origins, hidden hacks, surprising backstories, interesting character facts, including a shocking real name, and some pretty awesome Easter eggs. Here we go! So although this video is called 25 Things You Never Knew, this first fact is actually pretty well known. But just in case you didn't know, while Super Mario Bros. May have been released in 1985, Mario was actually born, or debuted I should say, 4 years earlier in 1981. Mario, or as he was known at the time, Jumpman, was a protagonist in the Donkey Kong arcade game, with him clearing obstacles, jumping over gaps, and climbing on ladders in order to make it to the top of the construction site and rescue his girlfriend, Pauline, from the clutches of the Great Ape. Although Jumpman might seem to be the hero in this game, the backstory for it says something a little different, with it being revealed that Donkey Kong was Jumpman's pet and ran away and acted out due to being mistreated by him. In fact, Mario/Jumpman was the antagonist of the follow-up game Donkey Kong Jr. in 1982, before eventually landing the hero gig. Now, if there's two things we know about Mario, it's that one, he has an absolutely rockin' Tom Selleck mustache, and two, he has a profession as a plumber. However, that wasn't always the case. The plumber profession, I mean. His mustache has always been rockin'. Initially, Mario was actually a carpenter, but during development of 1983's Mario Bros., where Mario and Luigi investigate the sewers of New York after the emergence of some strange creatures, creator Shigeru Miyamoto decided a profession change was in order due to that subterranean setting. Also, initially Mario's color scheme was inverted, with the character wearing red overalls with a blue shirt, as opposed to his current typical style. Mario may be one of the biggest characters of all time, but he was actually inspired by another major character in pop culture, Popeye. Apparently before Donkey Kong and Mario Bros., Miyamoto actually wanted to develop his very own Popeye game, which would have featured Olive Oyl, Brutus, and of course, the man himself, Popeye. Nintendo couldn't secure the rights to develop the game, so thankfully for the gaming world, Miyamoto decided to create his own version of the character in Mario. Ironically though, Nintendo did eventually get the chance to make their own Popeye game in 1983. Just imagine it though, we very nearly have Popeye cards. Popeye wasn't the only character/person that served as the inspiration for Mario, with another famous face referenced for the game, Jackie Chan. Now admittedly, this one is pretty indirect, but Miyamoto said that his work on Super Mario Bros. Was directly inspired by the game Kung Fu, which in Japan was directly licensed under the Jackie Chan film Spartan X. As we mentioned earlier, Mario had a pretty iconic and familiar style and look, but the reason for his trademark features is actually down to some technical limitations at the time. Because realistic hair was an absolute nightmare for the video game developers in the 80s, they put a hat on him to cover it up, while the giant mustache was used to hide the mouth, which also would have been tricky to create. However, the mustache also acted as a way to emphasize the character's nose, while the brightly colored overalls had the same effect for the character's movements. Cher, Prince, Beyonce, Oprah, Madonna, Bono, and Mario. What do they all have in common? That's right, they all go by one name. Now, while all the other celebrities do of course have surnames or actual names, such as Beyonce Knowles, Miyamoto is pretty adamant that Mario doesn't have a last name. However, he has also come to accept the film version of the character, which suggests that the brother's last name is actually Mario, meaning that they are called Mario Mario and Luigi Mario. Well, their parents clearly liked one brother more than the other. While this did make Miyamoto laugh, he also said, but just like Mickey Mouse doesn't really have a last name, Mario is really just Mario, and Luigi is really just Luigi. Now again, I know we said this was going to be things you didn't know, and we also mentioned it earlier, but although Super Mario Bros. Has earned success all on its own, and the fact it is the most famous game in the series, it is of course a sequel. As we mentioned, Donkey Kong may have been the first appearance of the character, but the 1983 Mario Bros. Game was the first Mario title, and introduced characters and concepts seen in Super Mario Bros., such as the Shell Creepers. As any Super Mario fan will know, the game was released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985, just as the console made its way to North America. However, despite it only making its way to the States, Super Mario Bros. Was actually intended to be the very last game on the system. In particular, it would be the last game on cartridge. This was down to the fact that the cartridge video game market was struggling in the mid to early 80s. But Super Mario Bros. Seemingly saved the industry single-handedly, and because of its popularity, it meant that games on cartridges did of course continue on. Now, if you're like me, your favorite character in the Mario world is as the little green dinosaur Yoshi. But even some of the most ardent Yoshi fans like myself didn't even know what Yoshi's full name was, or that he even had a name other than Yoshi to begin with. However, Yoshi's full name is actually T. Yoshisaur Munchakoopas, and what a name that is. While it hasn't been revealed what the T stands for in his name, give us your best guesses in the comments below, cause we'd love to hear them. Personally, I kinda hope it's Tiger. Before we really dive into some more interesting facts, how about a piece of useful information? While toads adopt stereotypical gendered characteristics, according to Nintendo producer Koichi Hayashida, all toads are actually genderless, and are a genderless race and they just take on these gendered characteristics. Also, he even clarified that Toad and Toadette aren't even in a romantic relationship, but are just really close friends. There, not sure exactly what you're going to do with that information, but you got it now. Now, despite it actually being in the game's manual, not everyone is actually familiar with the backstory for the game. But if you did read it, you're familiar with the surprisingly strange setup. So, according to the story, Bowser and the Koopas are actually wizards who wield black magic, and they decide to turn the residents of the Mushroom Kingdom into blocks, bushes, and of course mushrooms, while the remaining locals were transformed horribly into the Chestnut Men. With this all in mind, every time you smash a block or shatter a brick, you are actually killing an innocent local who has been transformed into these substances against their will. Yikes. Also, Goombas are mushrooms who betrayed the Mushroom Kingdom and aligned themselves with Bowser. While the backstory provided is already pretty dark, the game could have taken an even stranger tone if they had decided to follow their original plans. Mario was meant to go full-on John Wick, and was to be kitted out with a beam gun and rifle which he would have used for shooting throughout the game. He was even at one point intended to ride a rocket, but of course this was all eventually nixed. Just like it's probably the most famous Mario title, it's also probably the most famous side-scroller of all time. But just because it's the most famous doesn't mean it's the first. The first game to be credited with this design is the 1981 arcade title called Jump Bug, where the player controls a constantly bouncing car while driving through various environments. But another, better-known side-scroller game that really popularized the format is Pac-Land, which, as you guessed it, follows another notorious video game character in the land of 2D. Pac-Man. Speaking of notorious video game characters, another huge video game franchise to be under the Nintendo umbrella is the Legend of Zelda series. But other than the fact that they are some of the biggest video game franchises of all time, there is another similarity between the two, and that is the fact that they share a game feature. The fire bar seen in Bowser's Castle in Super Mario Bros. Is the same obstacle that can be found in 1991's A Link to the Past, and was actually originally created for the Legend of Zelda. Now, if you're like me, you found, or still do find, Super Mario Bros. On the difficult side. But then again, despite playing them all the time, I suck at them. But if you are struggling with a game and fed up of heading back to the beginning after losing your lives, you'll be happy to know there's a cheat of sorts to have infinite lives. If you hold A, then hit start, you can head back to the beginning of the world that you died in, as opposed to the very beginning. A number of you probably already knew that, but it was pretty mind-blowing to me. Guess I really should have read the player guide. Just like Kung Fu inspired the gameplay for Super Mario Bros., so too did Excitebike. In particular, the warps. Excitebike, which was also created by Miyamoto, featured a course selection scene, and Miyamoto wanted to have a similar feature for Super Mario Bros. But one thing he was wary of was having people skipping right to the end, so as a solution, he implemented warp zones. We mentioned them earlier, but the Goombas, who are the first enemy you encounter in the game, were actually the last to be added. Just as the game was entering its final stages, Miyamoto decided that there should be an easy enemy that could be defeated in one hit. So with little memory available to them, and not a whole world of time, the video game developers came up with a little brown blob with eyes and one giant eyebrow, thus birthing the Goomba. Initially, the first enemy to appear in the game was actually a Koopa Troopa, with Miyamoto saying, "Originally, we had a Koopa Troopa that came out, but we thought it might be a little too difficult for the player to jump on and then kick it. That's why we created the Goomba." It's pretty much universally known that the most irritating enemy in Super Mario Bros. Are the other bros, the hammers. What makes them more annoying and more terrifying is that if you stand around or wait to attack them, they will do it for you and hunt you down. Now that's worrying. Over time, Luigi has stepped out of Mario's shadow and has taken to the limelight. Get it? Lime, green, Anyway, he even got a whole year dedicated to him in 2014. Since his creation, he's gone on to lead in his own games and be his very own protagonist. But he even got a chance to be the sole protagonist in Super Mario Bros. In NES Remix 2. There is a whole port that has Luigi as the protagonist, and it is effectively the original game in reverse mirror form, except with one change, being Luigi can jump higher than his brother ever could. Another cool addition comes in the 1999 Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color, with the you versus Boo mode. That is, if you are able to acquire 100,000 points in the game, then the feature becomes unlocked. Once unlocked, either Mario or Luigi get to take on Boo in a race to the finish line. And it's pretty darn fun if you've never played it. So as you know, the final encounter in Bowser's Castle involves Mario going up against Bowser and having to step on an axe to take him down. But what makes this more interesting is the fact that the Bowser confrontations in Worlds 1 to 7 aren't actually the man, or Turtle, I guess I should say, himself. And the only real Bowser was actually in World 8-4. The way to find this out is instead of stepping on the axe, you should instead rain fireballs down upon him, which leads to him to reveal his true form as a common enemy, such as a Goomba. While the additions of Mario games we get across the world are good, the additions in Japan are so much better and a lot more unique. An example of this is in the exclusive retool of the original game, All Night Nippon Super Mario Bros., and it has some pretty darn cool features. To give some context, All Night Nippon is a radio show that started all the way back in 1967 and still runs to this day. And 1 year after the Super Mario Bros. Release, the special edition with All Night Nippon came to life. The major differences between the two include the fact that World 1 loses its colorful, vibrant setting and takes place at night, the Goombas and Piranha Plants have been replaced, and there are even a number of Japanese celebrities that make an appearance. Who knew? So Mario might be one of the biggest franchises of all time, but it was nearly taken down by an even bigger fish, Universal Studios. After the release of Donkey Kong, the character became a huge cash cow for Nintendo, raking them in a lot of money. But Universal had a bit of a problem with this and believed that Donkey Kong infringed the copyright of their very own character, King Kong. So that's why Universal, through their lawyers, told Nintendo that they had 48 hours to hand over all the profits they made through Donkey Kong and to destroy any copy of that game or any other merchandise that remained unsold. Nintendo originally decided to settle with Universal, but then after a few months reversed their decision, leading Universal to file an official lawsuit. However, it came to Nintendo's attention that Universal did not own the King Kong copyright. The case was later dismissed and Universal were forced to pay Nintendo $1.8 million in damages. And I like to think that they used that money to develop this game, although that's just my wishful thinking. Also, side note, I just find it kind of funny that Universal now has a Nintendo Land inside of their theme park in Japan. Just saying. Video game to movie/TV adaptations are becoming ever prevalent in the movie industry, such as Assassin's Creed, The Last of Us, and The Witcher, although admittedly the latter is also a book series. But before they became such a standard practice, the 1993 Super Mario Bros. Movie starring Bob Hoskins, Dennis Hopper, and John Leguizamo was the very first video game to movie adaptation, although it was admittedly both a critical and financial failure. However, that hasn't stopped Hollywood from delving into the Mario film world, with an animated feature set to drop in 2022 exclusively on Peacock. If for some reason you have a mint edition copy of the game, I'd recommend selling it now. That's because in 2019, a super rare copy of the game in near mint condition sold for $100,150 US. However, this was eclipsed in 2020 when a mint copy of the US game sold for $114,000 in July of that year. But this was beaten once again in April of 2021 when the game sold for, get ready for this, $660,000. So yeah, if you have a copy, you might want to sell that bad boy. And finally, considering its humble origins, it's kind of crazy to think that the Mario franchise has since spawned, at least at the time of this video, over 200 titles, including Mario Kart, Smash Bros, and Odyssey, and some weirder titles such as Mario's Early Years, Mario Artist, Mario Teaches Typing, and Mario's Time Machine.